Welcome to CFI Insider. My name is Melissa Myers, and I'm the National Field Organizer for Center for Inquiry and your host for tonight. If this is your first time joining us for a CFI Insider, you should know that there will be a question and answer session at the end of the program. If you have any questions during the program that may occur to you, you can use the Q&A function that's at the bottom of your Zoom panel, and we'll try and answer as much of them as we can. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and I hope that you will welcome our guest for tonight, Tim Binga. Tim's been with CFI since 1997. He's currently, or has been in the past, our Director of Libraries, Director of IT, Book Review Editor for Free Inquiry, Archivist, Purchasing Director, Chief Archives Officer for the Robert G. Ingersoll Birthplace Museum. He's lectured on such topics as Ray Von Pierce, patent medicines, Albert Hubbard, the RMS Titanic, digital libraries, Robert G. Ingersoll, transracial adoption, and more. He's fascinating. I can't wait for you to meet him. Welcome to our program, Tim.
Hello.
So, you know that a lot of people encounter CFI for the very first time by joining us for one of our CFI Insider events without any other exposure to our organization. So even if they are really well acquainted with us, very few people know what is in the basement of our Amherst headquarters. So Tim, what is in the basement?
It's a secret. No. The big thing in our basement here at Center for Inquiry is, of course, our libraries. One of the concerns that people have when they hear your library's in the basement is that it's in a basement, all the water, all the other storage stuff. We're on a ridge here in Amherst that everything drains off to the side very nicely, and our basement is wonderful for collections. So there are no problems whatsoever for water or humidity and temperature control or any of that sort of thing. So that, take that right out of your mind right there. That's a good thing. What is in the basement? Several rooms of books, archives, storage for museum type items. We have, of course, part of our warehouse for the company. So we have stuff like that. So it's really, really an interesting basement, to be honest with you. But I have a goodly portion of it for the library.
So what is the purpose and the mission of the library? When did it start? Where did it come from?
Well, initially the library, we like to think that the library started back in 1976 when we founded CICOP, but essentially it was just a collection of books. They were moved around the building a few times till we got over here on our Center for Inquiry building on Sweet Home and Wrench Roads in Amherst, New York. And when we got here, they actually made space for the library. They actually said, we're going to raise funds, we're going to create a library, and that's what they did. So from a small building in the back, they added on and created a big extension, which added library spaces and meeting spaces, and then they added some more again later on. So the library itself, we'd like to say, really started about 1991.
So can we see some of it?
Oh, absolutely. One other quick thing before I get there on our missions. One of the things about that is it's not clear to everybody that our primary mission, of course, is to support whatever we do here at the Center for Inquiry. But my particular mission in libraries is to preserve, collect, organize, and then share information about the movements associated with the Center for Inquiry. So it isn't necessarily just what we do at the Center for Inquiry, but it's also things that are in opposition to what we do. I collect a lot of those type of things as well too. So the biggest thing is collecting the materials, because as far as I'm concerned, we are probably the primary library in the world that has these items as far as humanism, skepticism, free thought, all those type of things. We have a lot of atheism items because it's related, but we might not be as significant in the atheism field because of the American Atheist Library. Same sort of thing with some of the paranormal. We have significant amounts of paranormal items, but the Rhine Center in North Carolina has a lot of parapsychology, although we are probably one of the best in general skepticism and in general paranormal anywhere. So that's pretty exciting. So anyway, may I start a slideshow to show you some of the stuff?
Absolutely.
as mentioned, we are considered the Center for Inquiry Libraries because we have more than one library. We have 3 libraries. One is the John and Mary Franz Skeptics Library, and that's related to what CICOP and CSI does. We have the James Hervey Johnson Free Thought and Humanism Library, and that's related to what the Council for Secular Humanism does. And then we also have, as the 3rd major library, the Joanne Boydston Library of American Philosophical Naturalism. And this is a collection of materials that are the philosophical underpinnings of what both CSI and the Council do. These are items on scientific skepticism and American philosophical naturalism. And the Boydston Library has items from philosophers like John Dewey, Corliss Lamont, Sidney Hook, and the James Brothers. So the next slide, please.
You got it. Hopefully. There we go.
One of the things that we have here, which is very, very unique to us, is the fact that we collect the newsletters and publications of organizations who are related to what we do, from atheism to skepticism to free thought to the public understanding of science, all that sort of stuff. We collect them. We have historical newsletters, like something used to be called the Ripsaw, which basically ripped through superstition. And we also have the most current newsletters that are still being produced today in paper, like the newsletter of the Humanist Association of Connecticut. And in this drawer, you can see a few minor things: Free Thought History, Free Thought Journal, some of that sort of thing. Next slide, please. Oh, you skipped one. There we go. One of the things that we also collect are electronic newsletters. We have both paper copies and digital copies of such long-term newsletters, such as like the Greater Philadelphia Story, New Mexicans for Science and Reason newsletter, and others. But we also have purely digital ones. And if anybody out there who is a member of our organizations who has some of these materials, we are interested in collecting those just so we can keep the history. This is one of the best ways to preserve all the various viewpoints of the humanists, atheists, and skeptics, and it's a record of their works, what they did at a given time, who the members were, and stuff like that. So as far as I'm concerned, it's one of the really important types of collections. Next, please. Hello.
Is it going?
Is it? There we go. This here is, oh, it skipped a couple again. Okay, that's interesting. There we go.
Yeah, there we go. Oh, man.
It's a little slow there, apparently.
Apparently.
Anyway, there it is, the Henry Gordon collection. This was a magician based in Toronto. Henry Gordon was a skeptic who primarily focused on Canada, but he worked extensively with CICOP. This is his personal collection of books, just part of it. This contains really cool and interesting stuff on magic and conjuring. One of the things you'll notice when we do a lot of our our challenge that the IIG, what is it, IIG out in California does. I always forget the name of that. Anyway, Jim Underdown's group, they do challenge. They do like the $1 Million Challenge, like Randy used to do, or the whatever it's called now, the $100,000 challenge. They typically have magicians in their group watching this. The reason is why scientists generally know how to get to things, but magicians know how to trick people. So that's one of the reasons why this information is important to us, because this conjuring shows us how to do sleight of hand things that the person may or may not be cheating with. So they know the signals to look for that sort of thing. And in this course, or in this collection, we have the Tarbell course, which is a method of teaching magic, including in the middle there that signed book. We also have in the top row there a couple of magicians' newsletters, which are very interesting because those basically show people how to do tricks and stuff like that. And they were really only for magicians, but those are a bound set of those. So those are ways that magicians used to share some of their secrets. So we can see some of those things in order to make sure that like claimants for that sort of thing are not cheating on those tests. Can I have the next? Oh, can I have the next one?
Yeah.
Can I have the next one, please? Thank you.
Absolutely. Oh, come on now. Here we
The
are.
Martin Gardner collection. Cool. Martin Gardner. Most of you folks are familiar with him. He was the science popularizer and a columnist for the Scientific American. In 1952, he wrote In the Name of Science, which became, in 1957, Fads and Fallacies in the Name of Science. And this is the book that kicked off the modern scientific skepticism movement. This is his personal collection of books and files that we have. I went to his house around the year 2000, actually picked them up, got to meet him. It was really cool meeting him. I'm a big researcher on the Titanic, so I got to talk to him about that because he wrote a book on the wreck of the Titanic foretold, and it was very nice to meet him. He donated all these materials to us, to our library, so it's really great to see those materials that he donated that he used to write some of his things. The papers are in some filing cabinets on a lot of the subjects he wrote about, including for his some of his other works. Next slide, please.
That's incredible.
That's an interesting picture right there. We received from a donor a few years ago with Randy and Martin Gardner, and I decided to put it with the collection, but it's a signed copy from both of them. I guess this was auctioned off at TAM a number of years ago, and the winner decided that we should have it, so he gave it to us, and it's posted right there.
Love that.
All right, the Queen Silver collection. Have you heard of Queen Silver before?
I haven't.
Okay, well, Queen Silver was a street corner evangelical atheist, a radical in San Francisco. And pretty much she was a child prodigy as well. She was able to talk about radical thought, which of course our movement was considered, especially in the 20s. So anyway, Cecil B. DeMille heard about her and was inspired to very loosely base his final silent film on her, which was called The Godless Girl in 1928.
Oh, wow.
Silver was born in 1910 and she died in the late 1990s at age of 87. She was really active in the free thought movement after her retirement. She was, I think, a court clerk for a number of years and in civil service, and she left that. And then she became involved with many of the free thought organizations. I think the Freedom from Religion Foundation for sure. But one of the things is she also helped to create what is now known as the Atheists United.
Wow. That's you hear about that kind of thing for like Christian evangelicals, but this is the only time I've ever heard of like a child atheist evangelical. That's amazing.
Well, she was like her parents were radicals, according to them too. They were radicals, so she was just following their tradition. But she was so good at it, I guess she outstripped them in a lot of doing that type of work. So it was great for them. Next slide, please. This is her collection of books that we received from her as well. This collection was slated to be out in our Los Angeles Center, but because of space considerations, it's currently in our Amherst office. And my understanding is there's files out there from that are part of her collection, in addition to like some of her Queen Silver's newsletter that was out there, which I don't even have any copies of, but which I'd like to get. But I would like to see if I could find those files and get them brought here so we could bring the collection together. Can I have the next slide, please?
Yep.
This is Dr. Ray Von Pierce. He was a Buffalo, New York phenomenon, but he was known worldwide. This gentleman pretty much was a local purveyor of patent medicines, but he was second only to Lydia Pinkham in terms of volume. Now, if you're familiar with patent medicines, Lydia Pinkham's like at the top of the charts. He was born in 1840. He died in 1914. His genius wasn't necessarily in the medicines themselves, but in his marketing of them. If you see that book that's right there in the middle in the back, it was called The People's Common Sense Medical Advisor. That book was pretty much the first book that went into people's homes in the late 1800s, early 1900s, talking to people about medical things like kidney disease and all that sort of thing. Almost like a first aid type book, but with all sorts of medical information.
What year would have this been something that people would have owned?
Well, this is late I want to say 1878 through probably early 1900s.
So not a time when people would have like a family practice there in their town.
Right, exactly. Well, they would have one doctor in town, but this would help them with some of those other issues, like how to, small issues that you didn't necessarily need to go to the doctor for, but you didn't also need to, it was bothering you, sort of thing. So,
sure,
but
sure.
in addition to major disease and things like that, so you could get a rundown of it. However, the thing about this book was it wasn't just a book that told you about those things. He would have let's say kidney disease would be discussed on the one page, and then the next page would be a testimonial for his pleasant pellets, which were supposed to help with your kidney disease, or his testimonials from other people. So that marketed that very well, and therefore it helped him sell a lot of medicine.
So like an early Dr. Oz.
Yeah, except it's more I want to say more like a, well, it can't be, Gwyneth Paltrow, because she sells a lot of stuff, but she's not a doctor. So
right on, yeah.
Dr. Oz, I don't know what he sells per se, because I don't pay attention to him very much.
Lucky you. Lucky you.
You
don't have that kind of relative.
I don't know. Yeah. Go next slide, please.
There you go.
This is what his genius was in the marketing. A lot of those booklets that are in the display cases are are advertisements. Like it would be like an almanac for the year of 1929. Mm-hmm. And then in it would be, use Dr. Pierce's favorite prescription, or his golden medley, or whatever some of those things were. Anyway, so these cases show some of the different advertising things that he had. The top, or the one on the right side there, shows a couple of the bottles, but another thing was that he was so successful, he had inventories, an invalids hospital created in Buffalo. The first one burned down, the hotel burned down, then he rebuilt it, and in 1883, you actually can see a little bit on the bottom, there's a cornerstone from that, which we know somebody who owns that, and some bricks from that actual building, which are kind of interesting as well. But anyway, he had advertisements on barns. He had newspaper articles or newspaper ads all over the place. So it wasn't necessarily that he was a very good doctor or that this stuff was really good. It was that he was able to market it pretty well.
Right.
Can I have the next slide?
Sure thing.
This is another view of some of that stuff. The stuff on the left shows some more of the bottles, and actually those bottles on the top display case that are in light blue are actually some of the medicines that were still available into the 1970s.
Wow.
Because they were still being made.
Well, so like Vicks Vapor Rub and aspirin were patent medicines at one point, no?
Right, but they also had some sort of medical benefit where these might not have.
Sure.
And, they might have made you feel better. He was involved with some lawsuits regarding that. He was, a lot of the stuff that was going on was instrumental to the foundation of the Pure Food and Drug Act in the 1906, I think. And so he was fighting against that because he didn't want to put his ingredients on the list, but or on the bottles, but that made that happen. So anyway, so he was against that, but this stuff survived, some of it, so it had to have a little bit of benefit, I guess, or make people feel good enough to use it. One of the other things about the Pierce collection is that I have items that are digitized and put on New York Heritage. As part of my library functions, I keep a digital collection there in New York Heritage, and we get a lot of people contacting us about they have a bottle from Pierce and could I tell them about it. So we've pretty much become the experts on Pierce around the world. So it's kind of fun there too. All right, you have the False Memory Syndrome Foundation archives up. They were in the news recently in New York Magazine because according to the person who wrote the article, that they were blaming the organization for giving abusers another method not to be held accountable. But the organization itself was created to deal with false claims of abuse implanted by poor psychiatrists and psychologists. It's about the accuracy of the claims of repressed or recovered memories of abuse, not the fact that there's abuse out there, but they're not fighting that. They are fighting the accuracy of those claims brought about by something of hypnosis or recovered memory therapies or things like that. Anyway, so we had some nice letter writing things, and actually Pam Fry wrote to this magazine. I wrote to them. I don't know if anything's ever going to get published in those magazines, but Carrie Poppy put some on her website, wrote about them. So if you want to see what we were writing about, you can go check out her Medium website, her her blog on Medium, I think it is, right? Okay. This is one of the collections that has also sparked a lot of interest in the libraries here at CFI, because we created a finding aid for this collection and we put it online at a pilot project for something called Empire ADC, Archival Discovery Consortium. Anyway, we have this one and another collection up there, and people are finding it who are researchers and are contacting us about using these collections for their research. Next slide, please.
Yes.
This is the Martin Orne collection. Martin Orne was the psychiatrist who pretty much created the world's best collection on the scientific examination of hypnotism. His collection here is all on hypnotism. He also helped set precedents for the court procedures that use hypnosis as evidence. So he's cited by the Supreme Court in over 30 instances, and pretty much he helped set the limits on which hypnosis testimony could be used. He also scientifically researched polygraph and its uses. He was also the psychiatrist for the poet Anne Sexton. If you're familiar with Anne Sexton, she actually committed suicide, and he became very controversial because he actually released tapes of his sessions with her, which is pretty much against psychology and psychiatrist codes. However, Sexton wanted that to happen. She wanted to get the tapes out there so people could hear what was going on with her life. So it was very controversial at the time. Next slide, please. This looks like a basement, and it is. It's part of our basement. But those display case, or those filing cabinets, are case documents for many of the cases that Martin Orne worked on. A couple of them you might have heard about. One is on Ted Bundy. Mm-hmm. Another one was Patty Hearst, John DeLorean, a few. But the big one I've been working with lately is the Bianchi case, which you might also know better as a Hillside Strangler case.
Oh, sure, yeah.
He was a psychiatrist who was in charge of the case, and in these filing cabinets and displays, we have videotapes of his interviews with Bianchi. So we had a project or a producer from California contact us before COVID, and he actually paid to have those tapes digitized so they could be used for some TV specials that are going to be coming up about this case. Wow. So that's pretty exciting as far as I'm concerned. And there's a whole bunch of cases in here related to a whole bunch of files related to the cases of Bob Bundy and Hearst and DeLorean. But the Bianchi one seems to be the one that most people are interested in. So, but you can see that they're filing cabinets. We also had a finding aid created for this. And the finding aid is also at Empire ADC. And like I said, I've had in the last 3 years, I've had about 60 inquiries about this collection there now, which is significant for the fact that it's only on that one website. We've mentioned a few times in, online. Next, please.
Well, so one question though, for our non-library heads, for those of us who are library novices, describe a finding aid. So that's when you're what?
Okay, a finding aid essentially is a list of all the contents of a folder. Essentially, it doesn't list and actually say everything that's in there, but it is a list of folder number 10 is correspondence between blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. So, and it is every folder that's listed in there. It gives you the organization of the files. It tells you everything that's in those files without actually being the files themselves. So you might want to call it metadata for files.
Sure. So this is going to help a user who's trying to find a particular set of information. It's going to help them locate that within a larger library. Yeah.
Right. I have a patron from Australia who wants to actually come here to use the file, not the Bianchi, one of the other case files in the Orne stuff. And the reason they're hesitating is because I have a list of everything that's there, but they don't know if it's worth it enough because they see there's a file of correspondence. I could tell them there's probably like 8 correspondences. For something that small, it's one thing, but then when you get 5 or 6 file folders, it's hard for me to determine what they want and don't want. So she's trying to
Right.
determine whether or not she wants to come here to use them. But it gave her the idea that, yes, there's actually a folder with this person's name on it in there with correspondence between them. So it might be important.
Got it. Okay. Steve Allen room.
Steve Allen room. There on the walls of our notebooks. In a normal library environment, you would actually take clippings and put them into file folders and put them in a filing cabinet. Basically, what Steve Allen did was he put them into notebooks and pasted them in and tipped them in, and he created his own personal clippings files on all sorts of different subjects, from the U2 incident to communism to socialism to Bobby Kennedy, all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
He as you know, Steve Allen, and most people, well, let me go back. Steve Allen was the inventor of the late night show and the late night show format, but he was also what people call a polymath or a Renaissance man. He did everything. He starred in the Benny Goodman story and played the clarinet in it for the movie. He wrote music and jingles. He was a comedian. He was all over the place, and he was really, really an interesting guy. Well, anyway, due to all those interests, of course, he had to have a lot of files to look and refer to. So that's why we have these notebooks.
So how did we come into possession of Steve Allen's sort of special interests?
Well, Steve Allen was a good friend of ours, and was very interested in what at the time PsyCop was doing, and later on a little bit of what was going on with the council. And anyway, he was a strong contributor. He helped us out with a lot of stuff. And actually, I had a picture, but actually somebody stole it, which is kind of funny, of Steve Allen dedicating the building back in 1995.
Amazing what people will want to make off with.
I don't know, it's kind of funny. It was autographed, so maybe it'll show up on eBay someday. But he was a very good friend of ours. So after he passed away, his son contacted us about acquiring these things. Now, we don't have his music, we don't have his comedy, but what we do have is all historical subjects related to what we do and all that sort of thing in those notebooks.
Amazing.
And it's really cool. I was going through something, was it on communism or something related to the presidency? And Allen wrote a letter to Richard Nixon. And I know that because there was a carbon copy in there in the thing. The next page, I flip it, there's Richard Nixon's answer. Signed,
oh my goodness.
All that sort of thing. So that's the sort of thing. He had enough clout to be able to talk to the people about these things and get answers back and keep them in his file.
Sure, yeah, he was having a late night show on one of the only networks, so millions of people were watching him every night. He was a big deal.
Exactly. So I would like to add memorabilia to this room at some point. Make it more, I don't want to say a shrine, but make it into a nicer little room with his
little homage. Sure.
Yeah, sure. Next, please.
Okay.
This is,
well, we can go into it. Here's the interior.
This is the interior. This is just a single item. It's called Meeting of the Minds. This is a pilot script from the first TV show called Meeting of Minds. Steve Allen wrote it. Pretty much what this was, it was a PBS show that ran for 4 years. He takes 4 people from history, has them sit down and discuss philosophy, religion, and many other things.
Love it.
Let's change the slide, please. Here's the Meeting of Minds show, first page of the script. This is actually Steve Allen's script from the pilot, in which he wrote he wrote it for the Steve Allen show, 1971. He had Theodore Roosevelt, Cleopatra, Thomas Paine,
this one.
and Sir Thomas Aquinas is speaking to each other. One of the cool things is, as you see maybe listed on the screen, is Peter Lawford was listed on this page. Merv Griffin was crossed out throughout the rest of it, is crossed off Merv and put host over it. But Steve Allen eventually became the host. So it looks like he went through a couple hosts before he decided to do it himself. But anyway, this series aired on PBS from 1977 to 1981. And Jane Meadows, his wife, performed on 18 of the episodes because he always had a woman pretty much on the show, tried to do that, which was great.
Sure.
But I thought that he originally wrote a part for her in each one, but only 18 out of the 24 episodes. So
That's pretty good.
he
That's
did
pretty
one
good for
episode
time.
supposedly too on Shakespeare, but he didn't have historical figures go in that. He had Shakespeare's characters come and talk to him.
Oh, fair. Okay.
That would be pretty cool. So anyway, next please.
Okay.
This is called the Vitozone. And this is part of the Runner collection. We have a collection of about 25 quack medical devices. And this is an item that created ozone for people's health benefits. I took this item to the Institute of Museum and Library Studies conference a number of years ago, and because we wanted to bring up a subject on how does someone preserve these type of objects.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember getting a good answer on that, pretty much because we can't really measure how well it's going to work,
Sure.
per se. But the other thing is we could plug it in, it could light up, but is that really working or not? So I had a little thing, and we never actually came to an agreement about that. But the Runner collection deals with a lot of food fadisms and deals with health-related type issues in the books area. And then we also have the quack medical devices. So that's a pretty interesting item there. And there's a lot of other different interesting items in that collection. I'm hoping we'll have some room somewhere to display them at some point down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Next, please.
Yep.
This is the rear book room, the current rear book room. We have a new project underway to create more space because we need more archive space. We're going to be changing this room out and making this into the archive room, but creating a more secure place for the archive room. Hopefully this summer. We have some funds put aside from a couple grants, so we're going to try to do that. And then also I have another collection arriving later this year that I'm not sure if I can announce it yet, so I won't announce that what's coming. But we're going to get about 50 filing cabinets and about 4,000 books. So that'll be fun, and we'll have to add room for those spaces later this year. Next, please.
Okay.
This is the Little Blue Books collection. Have you heard of them before?
Only through you. Why don't you tell our guests?
The Little Blue Book collection, Emmanuel Haldeman Julius bought the Appeal to Reason newspaper in 1919, which was the most widely read socialist paper in the world with about 500,000 readers per week, or no, biweekly. Mm-hmm. He bought the newspaper because it was failing, but he had this idea that if he were to educate people, they would turn to socialism.
Uh-huh.
Didn't work out that way, but he put out these little books that you can see stacks of them right there that were, numbered between 32 and 64, 128 pages that were on all sorts of different subjects. You had literature, you had photography, you had critiques of religion, you had how to spot phony seances, things like that, on everything you can think of. So he put them out. Go ahead.
That covers a lot of ground.
Yeah. And next page, please.
Sure.
What you should know about fortune telling is one of the books. You can see them. They all have little numbers in the corners too. He had about 1,900 of them. And then he also had about 1,900 variants. We probably have one of the best in the world, if not the best. There are other collections around the world that have a lot of these things. And then there's Pittsburgh, Kansas at the Axe Museum, where the headquarters for this was located, has a lot of them, but I don't know if they have all the duplicates, which we strive to collect the duplicates as well. But it's almost like baseball card collecting. Oh, I have this with this variant and this and this. It's kind of fun looking at them that way, but anyway, they're in all sorts of different subjects. Like if you see the one here, 987 is called The Art of Kissing, which is like, okay, you need 64 pages to talk about that. All right.
Sure. No, apparently.
You
never know.
Oh, yeah, that's true. One other quick thing about that is that the Appeal to Reason newspaper was the first newspaper to serialize Upton Sinclair, and The Jungle was where that was published originally. So they have the rights to The Jungle actually in the Little Blue Books. So that's kind of a cool thing there too. And next, please. All right, the Truthseeker. Many of you might have known about this. This is the newspaper of the golden age of free thought. Essentially, D.M. Bennett started this in 1873. He started this because he didn't feel anybody was doing it well enough. So I think we had the index in Britain going on, which was similar in other ones, but he wanted to put this out and pretty much talking about science, morals, free thought, free inquiry, and the diffusion of liberal sentiments, which is on the first masthead there on the first one. That is volume 1, number 1 there. And we have probably the best collection of hard copies anywhere. And we have copies that Library of Congress doesn't have here because they microfilmed a bunch. And we have some of the hard copies that they weren't able to acquire at the time. So we're in the middle of a digitization project. I've been working with the James Harvey Johnson Foundation, and we want to digitize these items and make them available for everybody. So I'm in the process of gathering materials. And next slide, please. I want to get this going again. The problem is COVID interrupted us because I had we hired somebody to do quality control, and that person was able to be hired full-time somewhere else, so they left. But we need to hire somebody else to do that and quality control the items and get ready for the digitization project. Mm-hmm. So this publication is still being published, and we have some, we help with the publication of that. And it's a really great resource.
Wow.
All right, next page, please. How are we on time?
Well, I would say that we have time to go over a couple of more slides. I think there's just...
I will go quickly then.
Okay.
This is what I call the rarest slide, and pretty much the one thing I wanted to show in here were the Freethinkers picture books from artist Watson Heston, which are in the middle. And basically you saw that banner on the Free Thought. He's the one who created the banner and the cartoons for the the Truthseeker.
Wow.
So next, please.
Yes.
This is Free Inquirer on the bottom. This was Paul Kurtz used to like to say that Free Inquirer is named after it. This was a publication of social reform, advocating for the abolition of slavery, support for women's suffrage and against religion, and was extremely radical for the time because it was in the 1820s. Frances Wright, the woman above on the right, she was a primary editor for the work, and she was one of the earliest reformers for these issues back in the 1820s. And she was probably the first woman lecturer on these items. She wrote a few books. She was a philosopher and Epicurean. Next, please. This is a signed Elizabeth Cady autobiography, 80 Years and More. This was signed to Belle Gamblos de Rivera, who was a suffrage leader in New York City. And the inscription, I don't know, it's hard to read, but I'll say, the few have no right to the luxuries of life, while the many are denied its necessities. And I was going to talk about the Free Thought Trail a little bit, but that's moving along very nicely. While COVID hit, I did a lot of research for them, and part of it was involved with some of the suffrage type stuff. Next, please. This is Cupid's Yokes. This is a pornographic, quote unquote, not just obscene, literature that was advertised in the back of the Truthseeker. And this is actually an original copy of the pamphlet. It really wasn't something that we would think of as obscene. It talked about the philosophy of marriage and all that sort of thing, and sexual self-government, as it said. But essentially the Comstock Act, and Anthony Comstock sued the Truthseeker and Haywood, and essentially D.M. Bennett and the Truthseeker were convicted on obscenity. Haywood was also convicted, but Haywood was pardoned and D.M. Bennett wasn't, which was kind of weird. But we think that Comstock was looking for glory by attacking Bennett and the Freethinkers. Another one, please.
Yes. This
is Reason, the Only Oracle of Man. This is written by Ethan Allen of Green Mountain Boy fame, U.S. history and furniture. He wrote the work, and this is considered the first free thought work published in the United States. It's actually a deist work, but it argues against supernatural religion, is critical of organized religion. This is actually one of the first editions. However, somebody in the 1970s, 1980s had it rebound, so that's why we have that red cover on it.
Got it.
Next. This is some Thomas Paine materials. I'm just going to breeze through. Those photos are from the 1909 dedication of Bennett's memorial, or of Thomas Paine's memorial. Next, these are first editions and early editions of The Age of Reason. Underneath are copies of liberal classics and Truthseeker writings of some of his well-known works like Common Sense and Rights of Man and Crisis Papers. But again, these are the first editions, like the first French is on the right, first edition part 2. The one on the left is a early edition, but not a first edition of that.
Got it.
Next is a closer view of those. You can see they're not in great condition, but next, please. All right. This is just some of our Ingersoll stuff. We have tons of Ingersoll stuff, of course, because we run the museum, but we don't have everything in the museum. Some items are just from here. One of the things, like in Wikipedia, if you go there, Susan Jacoby article has a picture with a letter Ingersoll wrote on vivisection that's currently on loan to the museum. Next, please. This is just a closer look at some of the books of his. They're actually signed copies, so we'll move on, please.
Yep.
These are Roycrofters' edition of Ingersoll. I wrote an article for Free Inquiry on Elbert Hubbard and the Roycrofters that was going to appear soon, but for space reasons, it was moved to later in the year. I'm not going to talk much about it other than to say Elbert Hubbard was an admirer, and he made quality copies of some of Ingersoll's works, and they're right there in calfskin. And you can see that it has the Roycrofters arts and crafts style.
Got it.
Only 2 more. Will that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
We could do it.
All right. This one is the next one, please, is a signed copy of one of Ingersoll's works to his wife, which is really cool to have. And the one after that, on the next page, is a signed copy to his granddaughter. So
very nice.
Yay, we made it.
Excellent. All right. So I have some questions here that some of our friends have submitted.
Sure.
Now, how large physically is the library, square foot wise?
That's hard to determine because we have a lot of weird angle here, but I can't remember. It's pretty significant. I will tell you though, for book wise, at the end of this year, if we get all the collections that were promised us, we'll have 80,000 books.
Goodness gracious.
And we also have microfilm, microfiche, periodicals. We're trying to take care of some of our periodicals as far as getting rid of ones that are not, or ones that we can get online and not store them here, but some of them you can't do that with. So if we can get them online in some capacity, I'm eliminating some of those, but a lot of them I can't. Like I have a lot of Old Science Digest and Omni magazine, which is really kind of cool from the 70s and 80s, which talks about a lot of cool futuristic stuff. There's a pay archive online, which I'm going to try. So I have some of those, but Science magazine, no, I'm going to be getting rid of those after a certain amount of time, things like that, because they're available online. So
got it. How large is the library staff?
The staff? Me, ta-da, that's it. As a matter of fact, I don't work full-time in the library because there's so much work to do here and other things. I also do the IT here at the Center for Inquiry. So,
right.
So I split my time between those mostly, but you know, I do a lot of other fun things. So it keeps me, you know, busy. I like being busy. And right now I figure if I catalog the books that are in the library that I have remaining to do at this point, I'll probably live to be 130.
Well, we hope so. We could certainly use your expertise until then. Now, in general, is the public allowed to view the collections? If so, how?
Yes, I like giving tours. I like showing off this stuff. The only concern I have is we're not doing much of that with COVID. Until we can get back into a better footing with that, I want to say, just call me and we can try to arrange something. I always want to do, I still always do it by appointment. I try to do that only because with COVID and with my schedule doing other things, I may or may not be in the building at that time. So call me, let me know when you want to come. And if we can make it work so it's safe for everybody, we'll do that.
Got it. Now, are you worried about vandalism from zealots, and how do you ensure long-term protection of the collections?
I keep an eye on the people who are using the library at any time. I get to get a feel for who they are. and use them. I don't have scholars who are here for any great amount of time that without knowing them and talking with them and getting, I like to ask them, send a questionnaire to them ahead of time. What are they researching? What types of things are you going to be using the materials for and things like that, so I can get a general feel for that. By doing that, it gives me a better feel for what they're doing, so I can either get those materials put together, or I could say, yeah, those are too rare, I can't do that. So I keep a very strict control on it, and I do watch them. I don't let them take materials out. Materials are not borrowed from the building. They have to come here to use them. Or in the certain cases, I've had scholars who I've sent materials to other libraries, but they're restricted to using them in that library.
Got it. Now, as for you, how did you get started with CFI, and what was it like to work with Paul Kurtz?
All right. I had an interview actually in 1996 with the former library director. They needed a cataloger bad. So, and I had just graduated from library school, and I was doing 3 jobs at the time, and decided, all right, let me go in and talk. Tom Flynn and Tom Flynn's current wife, Sue, not that he has others, and she wasn't his wife then, let's put it that way. And my wife worked together at the time, and my wife told me that, oh, they're looking for cataloger there. Are you interested? I said, yeah, let me go look. Well, I had read Skeptical Inquirer before that. I didn't know much about Free Inquiry or the other things, but my aunt actually showed me Skeptical Inquirer, and I got a lot of them from her. So I was familiar with that, but I just didn't know, oh, it's right here. And then as I got more and more involved, I learned more and more about it. So working with Paul was a hoot. A lot of times it was really, really good, and other times it wasn't. But Paul was an entrepreneur, and he was a founder, and that's the way it was. It was his organization. So you did what you could, and I want to say 90% of the time you could convince him of the right path regarding the library, because he relied on me for those things. It wasn't always, but he knew the course he wanted to chart, and that's the way we went.
Got it. All right. Now, can a magician wannabe use those magic books, those sort of magic for magicians books, to study and learn?
Well, yes, but they would have to be here to do a lot of that.
Sure.
If there was like one specific trick they knew of in one specific place, I of course could probably scan it and send it as a reference type item to the person. But if you're talking about a whole book, I can't do that, and copyright and all those sort of things.
Sure.
But yeah, I do stuff like that all the time. So not necessarily the magic, but I could do it for the magic as well.
Now, is the rare book collection or other rooms in the collection climate controlled?
They're all climate controlled, but not mechanically. So most of the controls we do are through humidifiers that are in the room, separate units, and we keep the doors closed pretty much, so the air doesn't go in and out a lot. It is not controlled by a state-of-the-art system. We're not doing that. However, for the new rare book room, if I have an opportunity, depending on how the grant money works, I might be getting a fire suppression system put in there instead of other methods of protecting the collection.
Excellent. Now, how often does the library get used by researchers?
It depends on the type of researchers you're looking at. If you're looking at long-term scholars who are here, some come for a week or whatever, so that I get probably before COVID, let's put it that way, we have to put it in those terms. I used to get, maybe 5 or 6 of those over the course of a year. They'd come for more than a couple days. They'd stay at one of the local hotels and come in, work 9 to 5 and go home, or I'd stay late for them and, we'd work, that sort of thing. I used to have college students come in for a day or two, from the local university. I had students at UB when I was teaching there who'd come in and do some research on digitization and things like that. So, and they did work for me on some of those projects too. So it all depends on that. I also get letters from school kids asking me, send me everything you have in UFOs. Does that count? I don't know. So
yeah, sure. No, those are researchers in training. They're learning. Now, what kind of things within the collection get used the most?
Well, again, lately it happens to be the orange stuff, because they found out about that. So that's getting major usage. The old days, it used to be the reference area, of course, because we would have, general reference items that were related to what we do, but not items you'd find in a regular reference section of the library. So we would have things like free thinkers or encyclopedia of unbelief or things like that would be in our reference area. Those would be used the most because those were the general introductions to the work, the type of items, but also that they were right here in that section. So that's why. As far as the rest of it goes, most of it is I'm finding that I'm getting a lot of our old skeptical inquirers. I have to do reference work in those. Particularly right now, it's actually SRAM, the Scientific Review of Alternative Medicine. That's one of our old publications that isn't available too easily. So I'm getting a lot of requests for those type of items lately too. And we used to call it shrimp, but it's called, what is it? Scientific Review of Mental Health Practice. And that's another one of our publications that was dealing with psychiatry and psychology. And it was a peer-reviewed journal from a few years ago that we do not publish anymore. But I have all the back copies, and so I get requests for those materials a lot.
William Smith put this sort of great question, says that as a researcher, he's surprised by how many weird and occult type items you have in the collection. Can you talk a bit about that? What is the weirdest part of the collection? If you had to put a nail in that.
I have a couple weird things that I would love to talk about, but I don't think it's good for the audience to hear about. But it has to do with myths and legends of male enhancement. Okay?
Oh my goodness.
So because it's a myth and it's an urban legend and it's all these things that may or may not work. So I had some of those type of items in the collection, believe it or not. I have a lot of rune stones that are used for I actually have some dowsing rods, and I have some tarot cards, which are really cool in those ways. Now, as far as books go, I have some older esoteric type of the Blavatsky type things and things like that, but it's not really, I would call it too occult. And it's part of it is all that stuff is super expensive too, and it's not something I can afford to buy. If I get donated some of it, that's great, but a lot of it is just you try to buy let's say something on spiritualism, and the spiritualists want it, ghost hunters want it, we would want it too, but who's going to have the more money? It's not going to be us, so they'll get that. I also have an interesting pamphlet, might work, that Robert Ingersoll supposedly came back to a medium and transcribed automatic writing that said he really was on the other side now and there was an afterlife. Yahoo!
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Yeah. So Robert Ingersoll's ghost was coming back and saying, I was wrong all along. Don't listen to me. Listen to me.
Exactly. We have a lot of the actually deathbed confession type things. People said Ingersoll converted on his deathbed and other people did. We have a ton of those type of items too, which is interesting in a sense, but most of those turned out not to be true anyway. But we do have a lot of occult stuff related with Joe Nichols' collection too, which I don't want to talk about. His is pretty separate from mine, but we have like skepticism related items, and we have his, nail fetish that he's got there, and some, all that sort of thing. Strictly speaking, it's not part of my collection. It's part of skepticism and Joe.
I hope to have Joe on this program one of these days, because he really does have quite an amazing selection of items. But he does he's not a technology guy, so it'll take some doing. Now, is there a way for people to access any of the digitized portions of the library?
Well, a lot of the digitized portions of the library that we have are like our magazines and things like that unfortunately we charge for because they're subscription, like on the Skeptical Inquirer, Free Inquiry. We are now offering those digitally. As far as digital items I have in the library, I have items at New York Heritage, which is the digital archive of materials where some of the Pierce things are, and the Empire ADC.org, which is where we have finding aids. So you can see what we have there as far as the items that are digitized themselves. I do not have those in place yet because I don't have a significant amount of those to have yet.
Got it. Well, we have a couple more questions, and I wanna go ahead and ask them of you before we wrap up for the evening.
Okay.
So, are you apprenticing any successors to continue your great work when you are done?
No, I got 60, 70 more years to go. So
that's right. Yeah, you're planning to live to 130.
I actually had some interns, and I actually have had some students in the past who I taught at UB, who the one I thought would actually come over here if we ever found the funds, has got a great job, so she's never going to leave that job, but she would have been perfect for coming here and doing a lot of the stuff. I've done it in the past. Again, a big part of that's on hold with COVID. And
Sure.
part of it is that a lot of the education in colleges now has changed over to remote learning, not necessarily because of the spread of COVID, but because it's a better financial model for them. So when I was teaching, it was all hands-on. Students are not doing a lot of hands-on anymore. It's a lot more theoretical, and
Right.
therefore I don't get as many students that come over here and intern or do a project for me. Like a couple of years ago, I had somebody digitizing photographs for me,
Mhm.
and we were doing digital photographs and getting them put into a database. I don't have that going right now because it's hard to find people.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to get back to doing some of these things in person again. You know, one day. It sounds making any plans outside of a couple weeks from now sounds like asking me to figure out how to like get to Jupiter tomorrow,
Mhm.
just feels like such a wild proposition. Now, what percentage of the library has been digitized for offsite storage in case of disaster?
Very big, nothing. I would not go
Nothing.
there. You have to remember that a lot of the stuff I'm by myself, so I don't have a lot of help for those things. But B, items are being digitized by other folks that we can then collect. So like
Mhm.
Conway Hall's been working on digitization. They're in Britain, and we helped them achieve a grant for digitizing a lot of materials. So hopefully they will be sending some of copies of those materials our way to keep here. And that, as far as the materials that we have here, part of it has to do with copyright, part of it has to do with the rarity of the items and who's going to be storing them. The Truthseekers absolutely should be done, although some places are getting some of those up. We're going to do it systematically. Some of the older newsletters, definitely, I want to get them done. That's one of my higher priorities to get done.
Mhm.
But there's got to be interest, there's got to be funds, and there's got to be, just the workers themselves. That's
Certainly.
always the hardest part, is more or less. I mean, of course, if you had enough money, you could hire somebody for a lot of those things, but a lot of it is just getting the right people into the job.
Now, if any of you would like to donate to the library in particular, please don't hold back. Go ahead and send any sort of library enthusiasm in the form of donations that you would care to send. Um,
We do
Tax time is coming.
Yeah, we still do collect books, but I'm more particular than I used to be, because we have so many.
Sure.
And if one of the things we'd like to make clear is if it doesn't fit our scope or it isn't something we necessarily need, we might give it to one of our other centers to use. They have space for those things, but also there's a possibility that we might sell it. So I prefer to have people give those type of items to their local library instead,
Sure.
because then the message gets out there. They may or may not take it, like our old magazines, they may or may not take, but sometimes I can supplement them with some new copies if the library is kind of hesitant, or on
Mhm.
books and things like that. They might take whole collections, those things, if they don't have them already.
Okay. Last question for you this evening. Okay. Are there any plans to digitize any of the um, older works for people to access? And are you digitizing any anti vaxxer material?
I haven't been doing the anti-vaxxer material because I haven't necessarily been collecting all that myself. A lot of that appears digitally already because that's still kind of a modern phenomenon.
Sure.
Although we could talk about some of the early stuff and going back to like when the anti-vaxxers, when the smallpox vaccine came out. So we could talk about those type of items and collect some of that stuff. I had a discussion with Paul Offit about that a number of years ago and was going to write an article. I just never got around to it. Our former development director was going to write with me and she left. So I guess we're not going to do that. But anyway, the Vaxxer stuff, most of the modern stuff is already digitized. It's just not something I have,
Yeah,
but
that'll be a
could be
part of the
collected.
magazines.
The any of the old materials, anything that I can digitize because it's so unique is going to be digitized.
Gotcha.
Somebody already digitized the Age of Reason, so the texts are out there, and you can go to Internet Archive and pick them up. So I don't need to do those, even though they're rare copies. But you're talking about the index may or may not be digitized. Truthseeker is not anywhere, everywhere. It's got a few issues here and there.
Sure.
I think I'm trying to think of the periodicals, journals, and those type of things are the ones I want to do first and get those taken care of. So that's my priority.
All right. Well, Tim, it's been absolutely wonderful having you on. The library is amazing. We could do uh, more in-depth
Mhm.
looks at certain aspects of the library just for days and days. I'm certain
Right.
of it. Now, if you are watching this and you've missed any part of it, the full presentation will be up on YouTube within a few days. And we thank you for joining us this evening. And we thank our guest, Tim Binga, for all of the great work that he does in many, many aspects of this organization, the library, and keeping us up and running and all of these other things. We're very much grateful for all of y'all for spending your Tuesday evening with us. Join us next month on also on the 23rd to meet Nick Little, our lawyer, who is the sort of captain of all of our various legal cases that we get involved with across the country. So if you're interested in that, we'll see you back here next month. Thank you very much, and you all have a great evening. Good night.